So choice. Okay guys, hey, today I want to talk about two different things. The first one, actually, I've been getting a lot of questions about the peripheral mouse and keyboard versus controller thing again, for a lot of different reasons, so I want to talk about that. And then I want to talk about basically the differences that separate us in video games for a variety of different reasons. Basically the D3 auction house, and then a conversation I had with a friend about the guns in COD. So first things first, mouse, keyboard, controller. I've definitely already talked about some of this stuff before. Once again, there's a good article on Mr. Picky Pants about it. Explains all the basics. So let's see. You guys want to know about a whole lot of different things. So one of the biggest differences when you're using a mouse and a keyboard is it allows you to play much more accurately and much faster. It's basically the best of all worlds. Also, you have so many different buttons that you can access much faster and more easily, so you don't end up with the controller issues where you're scrolling down to select some ridiculous ability. On the mouse and keyboard, you just hit a button and it's there. And if anyone's played World of Warcraft, it's not uncommon for some classes to be walking around with 40 or 50 plus keybinds. That's simply not possible on a controller. The controller at this stage of the game is definitely the most limiting factor on consoles. I talked about, before, the MMOs, and there's a lot of financial incentive for those to be put on consoles. The only way for that to happen is to have a mouse and keyboard. Also, I'm sure you guys have seen things, on Xbox Live. It's beginning to starting to look like, basically, it's like Windows or something like that. It's an interface, a graphical interface, GUI technically. With a mouse and keyboard, you get more and more, out of that. So you've seen them promoting things like Hulu, Netflix, stuff like that. Well, if you want to get like basic web integration, email, things like that, chances are you're probably not going to be doing that with a controller. You can, however, easily do that with a mouse and keyboard. Trying to think what else. Anything? Oh, just the play styles. So PC, mouse and keyboard, with that extra sensitivity, accuracy, and speed that you get, you can dramatically change your play styles. So that means you can do things, you basically can play much more aggressive and get away with that and do very well. Also, as a result of having the mouse and keyboard, you don't have things like auto-aim. And when you're on a console playing an FPS, you have things like auto-aim, in addition to all the other stuff that encourages camping, like level design, guns, kill streaks, things like that. You have like ADS and auto-aim, which combine with each other to encourage things like standing still and basically camping. That's not there on PC, and it's very easily capitalized on that kind of slow mushroom style gameplay when other people are doing it, because you just walk by them and take them down and just keep on moving. It's totally different on console because it's so much harder to aim and move that fast and be accurate at the same time. I don't know if that style of play is even possible. Obviously I have a long ways to go before my aim is anywhere near what my mouse and keyboard is, but if that's even possible. But anyway, that's the big difference. Like I said, the play style and, like I said, the possible repercussions for next-gen systems. As far as what happens if that does happen, like argument's sake, let's assume that it does. What happens? I don't know. One of the possibilities is we end up with more fragmented player bases than we have now, which I think would be horrendous. I think the worst case scenario would be that we end up with controller lobbies, mouse and keyboard only lobbies, and then maybe combination lobbies or something like that. The upside is that, some of those lobbies would have PC players most likely linked, and there have been rumors that Microsoft is doing that with Windows 8. I don't know, we'll see. Like I said, those are just basic rumors I've heard flying around. I don't know anything about that stuff, so just what I've heard. The second part of what I wanted to talk about has something to do with the peripheral setup, and that is basically, I had a conversation with a friend about the COD guns, but also the perception of the COD guns, and then the implications of the Diablo 3 auction house. I'm sure you guys have heard about this, the exchanging basically hard-earned cash for virtual game items, currency, whatever. So we'll talk about the COD thing first. So the COD thing, there's basically two parts to this. So number one, there's this imaginary list out there of guns that you're not supposed to use because they're too powerful, right? I think most of us agree which guns are too powerful and which ones aren't. But that being said, what I really don't like, for a variety of different reasons, is this taboo that I can't use them because they are too powerful. And I'll tell you why I don't like this for a few different reasons. The first is that, number one, I think that it inhibits a player's growth as basically a player by not using those guns. I think that anybody, no matter what it is they're doing, whether it's video games, sports, fucking jerking it in the corner, like, you need to figure out your what your limits are. And if you don't do that, well, I don't know, you're not going to be effective. You need to do it in order to set a baseline. Like, so this is where I am at my most effective, my most powerful, and then dumb it down from there and see if you can keep that level using guns that are weaker or classes or perks that are weaker or whatever. And players that are just skipping right around those, like I said, they're not figuring out what their limits are. The second part that bugs me about it is the mainstay of what I wanted to talk about today, and that is there's a variety of different variables that separate all of us from each other, and guns are just one of those set of variables. The other variables include things like time, basic drive and motivation, hardware, peripherals, internet speed, Jesus Christ, like the list goes on and on and on. Now, which basically feeds into the third point, and that is that the majority of times that I hear people talking about how terrible these guns, or not how terrible it is for you to use these guns that are so powerful, those players tend to be the ones that play the most. And the reasons why they're so upset is because those guns are equalizers. I have 1 day playtime in COD, right? So, and the reason why they don't like it is because I have a much better chance of killing someone who has 15 days played in COD when I use the FAMAS with whatever options, Ghost, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Well, they're another way to skill equalize the game. Well, the game's already full of skill equalizers. Like I said, there's already a huge amount of variables that separate us from each other anyway, but it's... I can't express how frustrated I get when I hear people that have 10 times my amount of playtime in this game, especially when there are other commenters that play games for a living, and they're the ones that are like basically setting up this monopoly on what guns you can and can't use, and everyone else sort of adopts this philosophy as well. And that's just infuriating. Like, this, it's really frustrating. It's kind of funny because I was actually talking to my girlfriend about this, and she was like, so why is it that they don't use them? And I was like, I don't know, I guess they feel like they're better than them. She was like, well, that's fucking stupid. And I mean, yeah, when you talk to somebody that doesn't have a lot to do with games, you're like, well, that's just fucking insane. It doesn't make sense. And it really doesn't when you look at it from a different perspective from the outside in. On a bit of a different perspective, who says that you can't have the most powerful, why? I don't know, don't blame the players, but blame the devs for misbalancing a horrible game. If they want to keep the FAMAS in and balance it the way they do, and it's still gonna be powerful, well, don't blame Joe Schmo because he wants to use it because it's the most powerful gun. Write your letters to Treyarch or Infinity Ward or whoever that are the cause of whatever game you're playing that has balance issues. It's not the player's fault. Battlefield Vietnam first came out, they had this M60 that had I don't know, 100 rounds, and it was fucking pinpoint accurate. Everyone was running around and it was just fucking mowing everybody down, just spraying, just everybody was dying instantly. And how can you blame people for not passing over that gun? How could you not want to use it? It is a total game breaker. And I played COD4, first thing I did was figure out which guns were the strongest, and I abused the hell out of them, and they are total game breakers. It was totally obvious. Now I could go from maintaining a pretty average 5 to 6 1 KD and easily jump up to an 8 or 10 to 1 KD when I started abusing, I don't know what the hell the name of the gun was, the RCP-90 equivalent in COD4, and then the stealth setups and things like that. It was a total game breaker, and it was obvious. And then from there you dial it back down, and like I said, those are your limits, and you come back and figure out what is something else that you can challenge yourself with that's maybe not quite as strong, and still try to keep those scores comparable to when you're using the best ball banging equipment or whatever. To talk about a few of those variables that separate us real quick, so things like time, like I said, that was one of my huge frustrations, is that with the COD guns, the people talking about how they're frustrated with them are the guys that have 5, 10, 15 times my playtime in a game. So you have time, absolutely massive, doesn't matter how much your potential is or how great your peripherals are or anything like that, how good your internet is. If you don't have the time, you're not going to be a good player. That's pretty much it. If you have 5 hours a week to play, I don't care how good you are. If you would have had 15 hours, 20 hours a week to play, you will be ass if all you have is 5 hours a week to play. You know, second thing is environment. You know, if you're sharing a room with like your brother and sister and I don't know, whoever else, like chances are you're probably not going to be going in that room and like zoning everything out and entering some zen-like state where you're focusing on COD and only COD and just trashing everyone. It's going to be that much harder for you to compete. Hardware peripherals, you know, obviously computers, frame rates, things like that, your next-gen graphics cards, those are absolutely huge. Those are, once again, game breakers. Although, admittedly, you know, most players that play games competitively, especially like myself when I did it, they turn all their graphics down to the lowest possible settings because shadows and things like that just get in your way. Especially when all the foliage is there. If all your foliage is there to do is be aesthetic, if you're not actually walking through it and it doesn't stop bullets, oftentimes you turn your graphics down, you get rid of it and it's not there, and then you have better line of sight on your targets. So yay for tips and tricks of the week. Let's see, what's the other great thing? Oh, internet. Ooh, this is huge. So I just upgraded my internet from like 10 megs down and 1 meg up to 50 megs down and 10 megs up. And I haven't played almost anything since I've upgraded it, unfortunately. But the few games of COD that I have played since then, which I think is 3, I don't know if I've pulled host or whatever, but I've been either 4-bar, it seems like I've been 4-bar a lot more consistent, and I've pulled host, definitely pulled it a few times, and whereas before I don't think I had ever pulled it even once. So I was playing, you know, on 2 bars, 3 bars, now I'm playing pretty commonly on 4 bars, but like I said, I need to play a lot more to figure out if that's just lucky, but if I have a better connection, there's a much better chance I'm going to get host, and as we all know, host is basically a game-breaking advantage in COD in the peer-to-peer system. It's unfair, it's stupid, but it's there, so capitalize on it, and just another one of the ways that you can separate yourself from somebody else. Which brings me basically to the Diablo 3 auction house. So players were grumbling and upset over this because they didn't want to feel like they were separated from everybody else because, you know, person A made more than person B and they were able to buy the better items in the auction house. But as I just pointed out, it's already happening. It happens in a variety of different ways. You know, it happens when, you know, people get paid to play video games and they're putting in 10 times around a time every week. It happens when someone has better internet. It happens when someone's in a central location. It happens when they have better hardware, or they don't have, like I said, 10 brothers and sisters to share a room with. It's already happening all over the place. The reason why Blizzard put this in, and it's there in Diablo 3, is because, fuck, if you Google WoW, you get 4 million Chinese farming sites. And yeah, I put up some ridiculous article on Picky Pants the other day talking about, like, how North Korea is funding themselves via, like, selling virtual currency to basically American citizens because they pay obscene amounts of money for in-game items. And yeah, especially as someone who makes good money, if I can go to work for like an hour and be like, okay, so I work for an hour and I could, you know, buy this amount of gold, or I could spend 30 hours in game to get the same amount of gold, like it's definitely a decision you make whether or not you want to buy something or whether or not you want to farm for it and do it in game. And that's up to the player to decide what they want to do, and I think they're giving people that option in Diablo 3. I think they also do have an in-game currency auction house, but they're just trying to standardize it, make it safe so you don't get ripped off and things like that. But plus, like, you know, put yourself in Blizzard's shoes. You know, if you're the CEO, Bobby Kotick, freaking Antichrist, of course Bobby Kotick's going to do anything to make more money, but you know, if you're a million sites out there competing with you, I mean, you have the opportunity to put out a game and basically edge them all out, I would do the exact same thing. I mean, it's obviously a service people want. If it's something they didn't want, you wouldn't have 4,000 sites that are out there. You wouldn't have North Korea funneling in millions and millions of dollars off of Americans buying game items from games like Lineage and World of Warcraft. So it's obviously something somebody wants. And my whole point is that it's not as big of a game breaker as it stands, because there are already huge variables that separate us in all sorts of different ways I think oftentimes we just don't think about. So, as always, looking forward to comments, criticism, critiques, feedback, all the above. Let me know what you guys think.